Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Gia. I am a 28-year-old lady who still lives in my mom's basement, and today I wanted to talk about A River of Golden Bones by A.K. Mulford. This review is going to contain spoilers, the first of which being that I did rate this book 1 star, and I do have a lot of things I want to say about it. There were some things in here that I liked, but there were other things that gave me pause. Yes, pause, because this is a paranormal fantasy romance that involves wolf shifters. In this universe, there are several packs of wolves. There's like the silver wolves and the gold wolves and what have you. It's all based on colors. In this universe, there is a throne that can only be ascended by a lost princess, except there are 2 princesses. One of them is a twin. They did not know about it. When the twins were born, they were visited by a sorceress who cursed them and their parents. Their parents later did die, and the twins were raised by a fairy godmother or fairy type character. The girls are known by other kingdoms, except they really only acknowledge the one girl. The other twin is seen as more as like her friend or her protector. She is the protector of her sister, but they are not linked as twins. But people do know them, one of them being the crown prince of the kingdom that is betrothing him to the lost princess. Except that prince and the twin sister that nobody knows about have a kind of flame. They have something burning between them. So from the very start, you kind of know that there is something going on between the twin that nobody is acknowledging and the crown prince. Princesses are raised in complete isolation, and once they hit of age, they will come out of their isolation, and the Princess Briar will marry the Prince Graemon, not Damon. His name is Graemon. Graemon, because everybody's so creative. And they do call him Gray, Grae, not Gray, like the color. I'm going to be going off my Goodreads review so I can remember the things I liked about it, but going off of what I was just saying about the 2 twins, there's Briar and Calla, and Briar is the twin that everybody knows about, and Calla is her sister's protector that nobody acknowledges as the twin. Immediately you know that Calla and Graemon have something going on between them, and she's completely clueless, but he is seeming to suspect that there's something going on and that the moon goddess will bless them with a union. But immediately this brought up something that I really liked within the first 10 to 15%. It was fated mates, but make it I knew we were fated mates all along, because I get really tired of the trope in a kind of fated mates shifter story or just fated mates in general where it is a shock that they are your fated mate. Akatar, best example. I kind of like the idea that you kind of know this person is your fated mate all along. It's like, oh, like I suspected it this whole time, but like I wanted to wait to see, for the bond to mature and stuff. I kind of like the idea of always knowing that someone is meant for you, and what is keeping you apart is not the misunderstanding of whether or not you are fated mates, but the fact that there might be extenuating circumstances between you, whether it be bureaucracy or isolation or circumstances. So these 2 are separated by time and space because the princesses were raised in isolation. I almost said captivity. God, them being wolf shifters, that was almost a slip. As the princesses come out of isolation, they are going to, the kingdom where Briar is going to be married to Graemon. And immediately when you get into this carriage with the twins and the guard that is sent to go with them, the guard that Prince Graemon sent, and it happens to be Gray's cousin, and immediately Briar starts to flirt with her, and Calla is getting really insecure because she's like, okay, there might be something going on between me and Graemon that I'm not really sure, like, was there all along, and I'm kind of like insecure that my sister is marrying him. And then her sister flat out looks at her and says, don't worry, me and him had a conversation last night and it's not going to be a problem. And then she starts flirting with the woman guard. Immediately, my brain started to fire off all its neurons because I was like, oh, so not only is this fated mates, but make it, I knew we were fated mates all along, but my sister's fiance is my fated mate, but this is going to be a lavender marriage. Oh my God, fated gays. And then there's no sister rivalry over the main man because the marriage in question, if it would occur, would be a lavender marriage. And I was like, okay, so is this setting up like what's keeping them apart is like bureaucracy, like it's forbidden love, like my sister is married to the prince and she doesn't have a problem with it, but society does. I was like, okay, Miss Mulford, you perhaps might be cooking, but that ended up not being the case. And the sorceress in question is like a maleficent figure. She comes out of nowhere and it starts to make a lot of threats. The king, who is getting ready to marry his son, Prince Graemon, to Princess Briar, his name is King Nero, and he's so cartoonishly villainous that I could just draw a twirling mustache on him to get the point across further. Truly no words. So just to revisit like our characters, so we have the twin princesses, Briar and Calla, good names. You have Prince Grayman, Gray with an A-E, not a Y, which, okay, everybody's so creative. And then for the king to be named King Nero. I feel like at this point that could be considered a stand-in, like the author put in that, you know, this character might be a Nero type character, a megalomaniac that's, you know, sought after the inflation of his own self-image, but they didn't go back and write a different name. They just said King Nero. So I was a little bit confused. I get very confused when the naming conventions in a lot of these are like, okay, this is a fantasy place where you have like a princess named Calla and a princess named Briar, and that's really like fantastical and whimsical. But then we're gonna have one random character that's named after a Roman emperor. I need you to be so for real right now. But that's something that I can get over it. It's okay. I can get over it. The sorceress's identity is also very interesting, but I will get to that. Her name is Saywyn. Sawyn. The sorceress comes in and starts making a lot of threats, and she's pretty bloodthirsty, and she just points fingers at King Nero and says, I hate you and you suck, and I will take the throne because I deserve it more than you, because you suck and you're a villain and you're murderous and evil. And I was like, okay, pause, maybe she has a good point. Because Nero is so cartoonishly villainous that I was like, I'm actually agreeing with the actual villain of this book right now that, yeah, that guy sucks. No, you're so right. There's also this thing about Calla and Briar's dad having siblings that died in a plague. There was an older sister and a younger brother that died. More on that later. So, okay, this book has legs. It has stuff that I'm interested in. We have Blessed by the Moon Goddess, wolf shifters, and my sister's getting married to my fated mate, but it's okay, it'll be a lavender marriage. We have fated gaze. Oh my god, this is amazing. But I am my sister's protector, and I am not technically a princess. I am my sister's protector. Calla's entire identity is the fact that she is her sister's protector, that because that's all she was ever raised to be. And the moon goddess like shines moonlight on the two couples in question and is like, hey, Briar and the princess's cousin are fated mates, and Grayman and Calla are fated mates. Well, now they can't get married. Well, fuck. Then King Nero goes, I'm gonna stop you right there, Calla, and I'm going to marry you to Grayman anyway so that I can get the throne anyway, because lo and behold, you guys are related. I didn't know that. That's crazy. It's and I'm just like, they're twins. How different must they look apart from each other to not make you realize that these two girls that are 20 years old are twins? Also, Calla is very fucking annoying. Calla goes, okay, so to prevent me from getting married to my fated mate, the love of my life, and preventing his father from getting my throne, I'm going to run away in the dead of night to go try to break my sister out of a sleeping curse. But I don't know where she is, and I don't know how to break her out of a sleeping curse, and I'm just gonna run away. And I was like, there must be a smarter way you could have done this. Like, I feel like if you activated that brain cell inside your skull for just a minute longer, you could have actually come up with something like better, like more pragmatic. I'm really tired of these dumb bitches in these fantasy romances or just fantasy in general. That type of story can be written quite well. That type of story, you know, I'm going off into the wilderness and I don't know what to expect and I don't know what to do, but I'm going to figure it out. I feel like that is something that can be written quite well. In this case, it was not. And then, of course, Grayman finds her and catches up to her. But this is where we get to the point where we're starting to get into the nitty gritty of the story that I just really did not enjoy, and I think really could have been done better. Calla and Grayman happen upon a traveling group of musicians, and Calla is immediately drawn to a specific person who's like the matriarch of the group, and she's immediately drawn to this person because they are gender non-conforming. Immediately we're getting this introduction of a non-binary arc for Calla that I was like, okay, yeah, I can understand this, but it was not explored very well. I've said previously that I'm very wary of any story that introduces a queer identity arc or a queer love arc that could be interpreted as nothing more than suffering and torment in a story, because I don't think that every story involving a queer character needs to include either a traumatic coming out story, a traumatic love story, or anything of the above. I'm really tired of seeing queer characters struggle and be in the trenches for the entirety of a book, because I think of it as the easy way out when authors are discussing a world in their book that is reflective of our modern world. Like, if you're going to construct a fantasy world in which gender non-conforming identities exist and in which fated gays exist, because a lot of things that happen with like shifter romances and fated mates is that it all seems to be centered around the idea that at the end of the day, those are breeding pairs. That this is romantasy for breeders. So by giving us fated gays, you're giving us something different that's not centric around this heteronormative narrative that at the end of the day, you are only meant to be with somebody to breed. And that was very exciting for me. So I was looking forward to this exploration of Cala's character as like the twin to the princess that is going to be queen. So Briar is representative of all things girly. She wears the dresses, she wears the pretty stuff. She's going to be queen someday, and her sister Cala is only to be her protector. Her entire existence is tied to the fact that she is her sister's protector. So what I was really looking forward to was this exploration of identity as someone who is struggling with not only their position in life, because they are twins to a princess, yes, so they should be a princess, but their entire role in life is to be her sister's protector. She was trained with swords. She wears the tunics. She wears the pants, not the dresses. So when your entire identity is tied to something that is a traditionally masculine role, and that is all you've known, when you're suddenly plucked out of that role because your sister has been kidnapped by an evil sorceress and now you have to wear the dresses and you have to be the princess, I can understand how that can cause a rift in your understanding your identity because you were raised one way and now you need to conform to a different identity, and that can be pretty uncomfortable. So I was wondering if this was going to be going down the road of Cala being struggling with the identity of needing to assume a princess position or assume a position in which she will be queen someday and not her sister because of her fated mate's relationship with Grayman, who she loves very dearly. Like, that's besides the point. But struggling with this and only being raised a certain way, basically being raised as a traditional assigned male at birth person would be in this universe. So the person that they meet in this traveling musician group is someone that is embodying this gender nonconforming identity, and Cala is very interested in this and in a way is approaching this person with a little bit of timidness because she isn't sure that this is allowed. She wasn't aware that this type of identity was able to exist, that there was only a gender binary, that you could only be your sister's protector, which is again a traditionally male role in this universe, or you could be the princess. It's the duality of gender being the duality of the two princesses' identity, about the two twins, that they are so different from each other. That is indicative and that is representative of the gender binary in this universe. So I was looking for that kind of an exploration where Cala was having to think to herself, like, this is how I was raised and this is what I was meant to be, but now I need to assume this role, and struggling with the different types of reactions to that role and how she might stumble along the way, that she wasn't raised to be girly or that she wasn't raised to be a princess in this universe. Unfortunately, I found this to be very poorly handled in a way that I really wish that we would start demanding more from authors when they start to put in these queer identity arcs, because later on it becomes a queer suffering arc. It becomes weaponized against Cala, and I really did not like that. I'm also going to read from my Goodreads review because I wrote this right after I read the book. What I didn't like about this is that it centered around the fact that Cala was intrigued by this gender nonconforming character whose name I can't remember. I think it was Aura, O-R-A. Cala was intrigued by the fact that she could wear pants and dresses. It was centered around the use of clothing to express your identity. And later on, when Cala is, suiting up in I guess not battle, but I guess more of like a symbolism of battle, that you are suiting up, you're getting ready to go face down an evil person, she was able to wear pants and dresses. She was able to wear something that was like a pants but with a long tunic that was dress-like but not quite a dress. So to me, it just looked like this, a little bit with a little bit more armor, but like that millennial like galaxy legging with the long flowy top. That to me is how it felt, just a little bit. Cala struggles with her gender identity mostly because she likes to wear pants and dresses. There's so much more that could have been discussed here. What a woman's role is in a power position, such as being a princess and a queen. What her role is in a fated mate's relationship, especially in a world where there's wolf shifters here, which is a notoriously popular place for breeding, since I guess they're part animal. What a woman's role is in society in general, but it comes down to clothes specifically. And I could have understood why it was written that way if this was a YA book, but it's not. This is new adult. There is sex in this book. These characters are in their 20s. So Calla's gender identity being reduced down to, well, I like to wear pants and I like to wear dresses, so I'm not a girl. She always repeats this line saying, I'm not a girl, because she's never been able to identify as a girl. Her entire role in life has been to be her sister's protector. Not to be a girl, but Briar's protector, which is more than fine. I just wish that this was explored a little bit better. Not even about what Calla's role is to her sister Briar, that she is her sister's sword and sworn protector, that this could have been a massive way to bring up the non-binary discussion, that her entire identity is tied to being her sister's guard. And then to make it even worse, it was revealed to us that Saywin, the sorceress, was Calla and Briar's aunt. So the father who was killed by Saywin was actually killed by his sister. And that story that we're told about his older sister and younger brother dying from a plague was actually not true. That was written into the story as a kind of historical revisionism of a certain event, because really not a lot of people knew what happened. But what actually happened is that Saywin used dark magic to turn herself into a sorceress, and in order to turn to dark magic and to wield it, you have to kill somebody. So she kills her younger brother in order to wield dark magic and escape from an arranged marriage. And I don't remember exactly what her reasoning was. I think maybe he might have sucked. I don't remember. And this could be another symbol and representation of what it's like to be a woman growing up in this kind of environment where if you are a princess, your role in society is very static. Your role is to marry the prince and be a queen and have babies. And I can understand if Saywin, the sorceress, does not want that, doesn't want to fulfill this role in society that is being thrust upon her. That is decidedly what a woman's role is in this society, wanting to escape that binary. I can understand that this story is playing with themes of what it's like to be a woman in a story, or at least in a world where your only role in society is to get married and have babies. There are always going to be women who want more than that. We see those characters in other stories as well, becoming revolutionary for their story. So Saywin is the girl's aunt, and she's trying to get Calla to basically come to her side. So the entire thing about Calla's gender identity is kind of played with throughout the story. Calla is talking to, again, I am unclear if this is their actual name, but I believe it's Aura, talking to Aura, and they tell Calla that there is a word in their language that means non-binary. And I don't remember what it is, I'm so sorry, but it was a word that A.K. Mulford, I guess, invented that means non-binary in a different language. So Calla is then introduced to this idea that a gender non-conforming identity does exist, and that her experience is not singular and it is not isolating, trying to give her a sense of community, that there are other people in the world that identify the same way that she does, or that struggle the same way that she does. And it's trying to show us representative that gender is a river. Gender is a river. It is ever flowing and ever changing, and it is not a binary. So Calla assumes this non-binary identity, and every time someone calls her a girl, she just says, I'm not a girl, which of course, affirm yourself. Tell people who you are. We love our she-theys. But the way that this is then turned in the story to become a trauma arc really bothered me, because later, during a very emotional part of the story where Calla and Saywin are facing off, Saywin calls Calla a girl, and Calla says, I'm not a girl. And of course, yes, affirm yourself. This introduces a piece of dialogue that takes the course over a paragraph, in which Calla is telling Saywin in the middle of heated emotional verbal battle that they are not a girl. They are non-binary. And Saywin is like confused and appalled, and all of a sudden becomes very transphobic. And Saywin was telling us a couple of pages earlier that, you know, it is a shame that people do not accept fated gays, because we can't help who the moon goddess tells us we're fated to love. Like, that's not our fault. That's not their fault. We should really be more accepting of fated gays existing. But then we skip ahead and we have the whole I'm not a girl conversation, and Saywin immediately becomes a TERF. Saywin tries to use it against Calla by outing her to Gray, who immediately accepts her, and Saywin is disgusted. So a couple of pages ago, Saywin is like, man, it's a shame that the society doesn't accept fated gays. And then a couple of pages later is like, I'm going to accept the award for the most transphobic villain of all time. Because Saywin just looks at Prince Grayman and says, hey, your mate doesn't identify as a woman. I'm so confused, because at what point did we did we discuss that not only that being non-binary in this universe is bad, like we know that it exists in another culture, but that it is immediately bad and not accepted. So like it's never happened before in this kingdom. This has never happened in this kingdom. Number one, I'm confused. Number two, why are you so disgusted about it if it's a brand new concept to you? And also to then immediately wield it against Kala as like a way to point and laugh at them, I guess, is the closest translation I can get, is just to point and laugh. I didn't understand like what the turn was in this, because it's like, you know, in a heated magical battle between these two people, and then all of a sudden it just turns into a schoolyard bullying match. I am very wary of stories that use the reveal of queer identity as character evolution in the form of suffering. Why is Kala's identity being weaponized by the villain to cause instability in her fated mateship when there has been very little discussion before about this? There are no seeds planted over whether Grayman has very rigid views about gender, or if this universe has very rigid views about gender. Because if that's the case, then we need to go back to the fact that Kala is her sister's sworn protector and wears pants and wields a sword, and she's not shamed for that. She's just acknowledged as her sister's sworn protector. So there's no seeds planted that in this kingdom it is wrong to be an assigned female at birth and not embody this strict gender binary that Briar falls into. There is nothing about the monarchy and heirs and whether Kala feels pressured to have them if when she doesn't, because suddenly being put in a position where you are in a fated mateship with the crown prince, you are going to end up marrying him, and you are going to be the next queen in question of your throne that you're going to reclaim from your dead parents. And there's little to no discussion about Kala thinking to herself, yes, I'm finally in the relationship that I want to be in. Like, I can't believe that the person that I've loved my whole life is my fated mate and we're going to be together forever. But wait a minute, does this mean I have to have kids? Like, there's no discussion, literally no discussion, because if we're going to be discussing this strict gender binary in this series, part of that very strict gender binary is the fact that an assigned female at birth has to give birth, has to have children. And so in this entire exploration of Kala's identity, still we are getting no discussion about how it affects her to be forced into this specific gender binary, only to be uncomfortable with it. But to then find themselves, yes, I love it. It's very heartwarming. I love this. There is nothing that is discussed about what it is like in this universe to be forced to conform to the binary that you do not identify as, and what that means for you. Whether as a non-gender conforming person, what it means for you to be placed in this box that you do not align yourself with. You create your own box, and Kala does do this, which I do appreciate. Unless there is a part of the story that involves paving the way for this new box to include not just Kala, but Aura and other people, Kala is still expected to conform to the rigid gender binary. They are still expected to marry Prince Grayman and to have his babies. There has been nothing up until this point that suggests that Grayman would not love Kala any less, no matter their identity. There's nothing in this story that says that Grayman has very rigid views about the gender binary, that women are meant to do one thing and men are meant to do another. There's nothing planted here that would make it a point of conflict or contention. It is just trying to pull out the rug from under this relationship for no reason. And when Grayman accepts Kala for who they are, Saywin is just handed the Transphobe of the Year award. This is only the fact that we have to make Saywin transphobic and cruel to really drive the point home that she is very evil and must be stopped. Because previously, I found myself low-key agreeing with Saywin that King Nero sucked and didn't deserve this throne. But then later, we're just told that Saywin is a TERF, so absolutely she has to go. I'm tired. And I understand that A.K. Mulford is themselves a non-binary person, and I do understand that this is probably their way of talking about their own identity in a story, trying to write not a self-insert character for themselves, but trying to reflect their own identity journey onto a story, which I do respect. I do understand. This has nothing to do with the fact that I don't believe that this book should exist. I believe that this is a very shallow exploration of gender in this story. I think in general, it is a very shallow representation and exploration of what it means to be a non-binary person, much less in a not all fantasy settings are medieval, but in a setting at least where you've given us a paranormal romance like tilt to it, in which fated mates is very closely aligned with it being romantasy for breeders. And yes, you gave us fated gays. I do appreciate that. But I wonder if the wolf shifter part of the story could have been taken completely out and the story would be largely the same. And they were just people or fairies. Like, let's just go back to what we know, right? Without the discussion of the implications of what it's like to exist in a world in which you, as an assigned female at birth, have a singular role in life, and that's to get married and have cubs. That is your singular role in life, or at least that is one of your singular roles in life. Without an exploration of what that means and how you intend to change that box and how you intend to revolutionize that identity by being yourself, without that discussion, the wolf shifter elements of this story mean fuck all. They mean literally nothing. There is something that can be discussed here. There is things that can be explored here. But the fact that it wasn't is very disappointing. And again, this is not reflective of the author's intent of what they meant to include in this book and what they meant to write in this book. I fully respect and appreciate the fact that this book was written as someone trying to write their own gender exploration into a book of their own. Completely understand, completely respectable. Nothing against A.K. Mulford. I have liked other books written by this author. But, I think we need to demand more from authors when they write stories like this, because it feels very one note, it's very shallow, and it's not good. It's not good. I think we need to be demanding more from people, and that if they're going to be writing queer stories, they need to be writing them without a fantasy homophobia or a fantasy transphobia element to the story. I think of it as the easy way out. If you're going to be writing a book that's in a fantastical setting and it's your own world, why are you using the conventions of our terrible modern world on this universe? Making a fantasy world homophobic is just another day at the office. I encourage people to do differently and to be different and to write different stories than always just the same thing, that every time a new character comes on the page and they're gay, we know they're going to be struggling with not only their identity and grappling with the social implications of them having a public identity that is queer. What that means of whether society will accept them, will their family accept them, do people in this society see them as a freak? It upsets me. It really, really, really does. I think we need to be demanding more from people, that if you're going to write a shallow representation of what it's like to be queer in a universe that is not our own, you should be expected to be criticized for making a shallow representation of what it's like to be a queer person in a universe that is not our own. At the end of the day, this boils down to not all queer representation is good representation, and I think we need to be calling out what is poor representation. Anyways, that is all from me. Thank you so much for hanging out with me if you got to the end of this video. If you'd like to find me anywhere else, you could find me on Twitch and Twitter. Remember to drink water and be nice to each other and exude kindness and empathy with everything that you do, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.